What's going on YouTube? So I was getting a shitload of questions on Instagram about the Olympics. Obviously, Tokyo 2021 is on at the moment and everyone wants to know all these different things about what the Olympics was like. So instead of answering on my Instagram story, I thought I'd put together a little YouTube video asking some of your key questions. Now, warning, there's some graphic content in these questions, so I apologize if I offend anyone. We're going to be talking drugs, sex, and rock and roll, so stay tuned. That is always the top question when anyone asks, what was the Olympics like? Was everyone just banging each other? And can I be brutally honest? It's nothing worse than what you'd see on a Saturday night in your local town. I actually had a girlfriend while I was there at the Olympic Village, so there was no for me, but I didn't really hear about a damn load of orgies. The Olympics was always a childhood dream of mine to go and compete. I think the most amazing thing was the food hall, the opening ceremony, and the moment I had on the platform walking out to compete were by far the most special memories of my life. Wow. Okay, so the qualifying process is different for every country and every year it changes. So the qualifying process for me when I was going in 2016 was that we had to try and qualify at the European Championships as a male team. Okay, so what that meant is all the men went to the European Championships, they finished as best they could in the championship, and that would get you a number of points. If our team had enough points, that would get us one spot for the Olympic Games from the European Championships. So it goes into a little bit more detail than that, but basically what happened then was it was down to all of the best British men at the British Championships of 2016 to fight it out and do the best result in order to get that one spot. And it was very close between 3 or 4 of us as to who was going to go, but it all came down to the final qualifiers, which you can see the actual full video of me at that final qualifiers here on YouTube. Hell of a competition. By far my favourite one I've ever done. I have to admit, whenever I listen to the commentary of the Olympics, especially the weightlifting, I mute the screen. Okay, I think the commentary for the weightlifting is absolutely dog shit. It's extremely boring and it doesn't make it overly interesting to watch. So in my opinion, it always gets turned off. Well, the Chinese are absolutely next level. There's lots of speculation whether that's because they're on drugs or whether they're just so much better at Olympic weightlifting than us. But one thing that I will say, in my opinion, as to why the Chinese are so dominant is the amount of people that participate in Olympic weightlifting in China is absolutely massive. It's one of their main sports. Now, the bigger the pool of participants, the better you're going to have people participating in that sport. Not only that, but you'll get kids in China going into training camps from a super young age. You've probably seen clips like this on YouTube of 6, 7-year-olds smashing out amazing lifts. It's because they're training flat out from such a young age. So I think that'll definitely help the fact as to why they are so dominant in particular weight categories, because they've got a huge pool of great athletes to select from. The training for the Olympics definitely had a huge impact on my social life. I can count on one hand how many times I spent time in the playground when I was a kid. I was training full time. I never went out and partied much at all up until after the Olympic Games. Girlfriends and friends were very hard to hold down because for me, during my period of time training up to the Olympics, my training was the priority above anything else in my life. So all I would ever do would prioritize what I needed to do for my training, which meant that, you know, if someone asked me to go to their birthday party, I was like, no, I've got training. If someone asked me to go out on the piss and have a few beers, it's like, no, I've got competition coming up. So it definitely affected me. But for me, what I got to experience in terms of travel and competition and achieving my dream versus having those nights out and parties, it was well worth it for me. But I definitely would say that's one of the main things now why I'm not considering ever wanting to do another Olympic Games again is the fact that you have to sacrifice so much to get to that level that I wouldn't want to put the people around me now through that again to try and make it to another Olympic Games. Yeah, I personally would totally agree with you. Weightlifting isn't in the Olympic sense the most enjoyable to watch. And one of the key things that I would change if it was me is I would run the weightlifting event more like what they do in the CrossFit events. So what I would do is instead of having it one stage and one person coming out and doing their lift and then fucking off, and then the next person coming out and you not having a clue what's going on with the scoreboard, what I would do is do it just like they do at the CrossFit Games. I'd have everyone warming up in like an arena sense, okay, on a platform, and then it would be a rising bar, and they would every 2 minutes or after every person, they would get to take their lift, load their bar, and pick their weight. I think it would be much better for the people that are watching to get an idea about not only what's happening in the warm-up, but also get a sense of that person's personality, because that's one of the things I think really lacks in Olympic weightlifting competition is you never really get a sense of who that person is that's coming out and lifted, what they've been through to get to the actual Olympic Games, what their training has been like leading up. And that would be another thing that I'd add to the competition. I'd have like a show reel before the event to kind of like spotlight the key athletes that are going to be competing and actually create a little bit of a story as to what their build-up's been like a pre-competition interview, which I think would make it much more enjoyable as well for people to watch. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. The kitting out is arguably one of those things growing up that you dream about as being like the best bit of it. It's all the stash that you get. We were kitted out by Adidas for the Olympic Games in 2016, and the whole kitting out experience is mad. So they hired like this huge, I think it was at the NEC in Birmingham, and you went in there and you had like a specific person take you around each section of the kitting out. So the first thing you did was you went into your suit fitting. So this was the suit that you'd wear if you went to any of the sort of key formal occasions where you'd have a suit. So they'd measure you all up, they'd have your suit made for you. And if you needed any alterations, which you can imagine can happen because you've got people of all different sizes at the Olympic Games, and they do the alterations there and there for you. You'd then walk through into another section where you'd get all of your casual wear, so your village wear they called it. So this would be all your tracksuit bottoms and your t-shirts, and you've got more stuff than you could ever imagine. You get like two of this, two of this, two of this. And then you go for your kit that you wear outside of the village. So this is more like your competition and training gear. And then probably the most special bit after you get the shoes is you go into this special room and they hold you for a moment. And then they invite you in and they put your actual competition outfit on a mannequin that they've made just for you and show you exactly what you're going to be wearing on the day that you compete in the Olympics, which was probably one of the most special moments because I was the only guy and there was only one girl that went in 2016. So it was literally like they made it just for me. So that was probably the most special part. But you can imagine 5 kit bags of all the kit in the world. But by the end of it, after you've worn it all, I've probably now only got about 2 t-shirts left of my Olympic kit and my Olympic lifting suit, because you think that that's the most important bit to start with, but in actual fact, afterwards, it's the memories and the kit doesn't really mean anything to you. Yeah, 100%. I think the moment that really touched me the most was walking up onto the stage for my first lift. And I remember my name getting called and standing on the platform for presentation. And it was in that moment that I knew that it was like all of my bad days, good days, hard training sessions, great training sessions, like sad times flashed in front of my eyes. And then it was just me and that platform, and it was all worthwhile for that very special moment that I had there on that day. So it definitely felt like it was worth it in the long run. But would I do it again? No. I lift in sliders for the banter. I would not consider lifting in sliders at the Olympic Games. I think that they wouldn't quite be as good as my lifting shoes, although I have snatched 150 in these, which is 2 kilos more than what I did at the Olympics. I did, however, wear a red snapback at the Olympics, and that was one of the things that pissed so many people off. They were like, oh, why did he wear a snapback? But for me, it goes back to what I was saying a moment ago. For me, wearing a snapback at the Olympics was my way of trying to express my personality for that few minutes that I had there on the platform. It doesn't go against any rules or regulations. It was just purely my way of feeling comfortable when I was lifting and expressing a little bit more about me when I compete. Because I think one of the key things that people forget, regardless of whether it's the Olympics or your first local meet, is you do it because you enjoy it and it's for fun, and no one's ever going to give you that moment back again. So for me, that was my way of just making the most of the time that I had there on the platform. No, you don't get money for competing, you don't get money for winning a medal. In Olympic weightlifting, you'll get a pat on the back. However, for some other athletes in some other countries, there will be incentives from sponsors that if they win a medal, they will get some monetary value. But in Olympic weightlifting, absolutely not. I didn't get anything even for going. It cost money probably to go. So my all-time best lifts that I did to qualify for the Olympics was 153 and 194. At the Olympics, I did 148 and 185 or 188. So I'm not sure where that would have placed, but I finished 14th. And I think this year, the Olympics is probably the easiest it's ever been because there's a lot of countries that aren't competing in this championship. You're missing out, like Russia, a lot of the top countries that have been excluded due to drug bans or country bans. So I think it would definitely have been the easier year. So I would have liked to think that, I think my categories, it was yesterday, so I have to check that up. I probably would have finished a little bit higher than what I did in my previous Olympics. 100% I think he will. I saw him snatch 120 and do 155 for a double in the warm-up, which is absolutely outrageous. So I think if he's going to do it, he'll do it here. So yes, I have got a New Zealand passport. However, I've never competed for New Zealand. A lot of speculation around this, or a lot of conversation was brought up around whether it was okay that Laura Hubbard should compete in the Olympic Games. I think for me personally, my take on it is women's weightlifting has only been in the Olympics for like the last 3 years. And I think women have fought for a very long time to have equal rights in sporting competitions as men. And I think by letting a transgender person compete in the female section of the Olympics, it actually discredits a lot of what women have been doing to actually have their right to compete on a level playing field in sport. I think what would have been the best way to combat this is to start thinking about, because Laura Hubbard is probably the first and probably won't be the only person who's transgender who wants to compete in the Olympics. I think they need to look at ways in which they can have separate categories or a separate event where it allows for transgenders to compete, but doesn't take away from those women that would have had to compete against her that aren't as, it's like genetically aren't as strong, okay, as men. So it definitely wasn't a level playing field. So in my opinion, no, she shouldn't have competed in that event, but there needs to be something that gives inclusion for transgender people in Olympic events. Sexy and male weightlifting don't tend to go hand in hand together, really. But I'm so out of touch with fucking who's good looking weightlifters. Probably Liu Xiaojun. He looks like he's been chiseled granite. Yeah, so I'd say Liu Xiaojun's probably he's got the best rig by far. Thank you for watching this Q&A on the Olympics, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Any other questions, don't be afraid to fire them into the comment section below this video. Please like, share and subscribe, and if there's anything else that you want to hear, like I said, stick it in the comments. We'll be back again in a few days time with another YouTube video. This is something that me and Crispy are working on week in, week out to keep bringing you more long form content. I hope you enjoyed that one. Take care.